the guild that nearly controlled the crown. It started as an association meant to protect trade, shared rules, mutual defense, a collective voice against chaos. But over time, that voice grew louder, steadier, and far harder to ignore, until one day, it was no longer clear whether the guild served the crown or the crown served the guild. London's guilds were born from necessity. In a city bursting with commerce, they offered order where none existed. Standards were enforced, apprentices trained, disputes resolved without violence. For generations, this arrangement worked. The crown ruled, the guilds regulated. Each respected the other's domain. But as money accumulated, so did leverage. To understand why this moment mattered, we must return to a period when the state relied heavily on organized commerce. Wars needed funding. Expansion needed supplies. Stability depended on steady revenue. The guilds, controlling labor, production, and distribution, sat at the center of that flow. Their cooperation was not optional. It was essential. The reveal began when the guild realized its collective strength exceeded its original mandate. By coordinating decisions, it could influence prices across the city. By delaying cooperation, it could pressure officials quietly. What looked like routine negotiation became leverage. And leverage, once discovered, is rarely surrendered. Gradually, boundaries blurred. Guild leaders were consulted on policy. Their representatives appeared in advisory roles. Requests from the crown were met with conditions. Privileges expanded. Exemptions multiplied. Each concession seemed minor. Together, they formed a shift no one announced, but everyone felt. The city began to sense it. Decisions slowed when guild approval wavered. Policies softened when resistance loomed. Authority moved through committees rather than commands. The crown still ruled, but increasingly it negotiated. London was approaching a dangerous threshold. When collective economic power concentrates, it does not need to overthrow authority. It can surround it. And the guild that once kept order was now close to shaping the state itself. As the guild's influence expanded, its presence began shaping London's political rhythm. Decisions once issued from the crown now arrived after consultation. Tax proposals stalled until guild leaders weighed in. Regulations softened to preserve cooperation. What had started as pragmatic coordination evolved into quiet dependence. Inside the guild, strategy replaced solidarity. Leaders debated not how to serve members, but how to leverage necessity. By aligning production slowdowns or accelerating output at critical moments, they could signal approval or resistance without open defiance. The city learned to read these signals carefully. A silent pause carried meaning. A sudden surge conveyed compliance. Tension grew among independent merchants who felt trapped between authority and association. To trade efficiently, they needed guild approval. To avoid punishment, they needed royal compliance. Their margins shrank as obligations multiplied. The guild's internal cohesion, once a strength, now created barriers to entry and limited innovation. The conflict sharpened when the crown attempted to assert independence. Officials proposed measures designed to bypass guild mediation, encouraging direct contracts and alternative supply chains. The response was swift and coordinated. Production slowed. Quality dipped. Disputes increased. Nothing was declared. Nothing needed to be. The message was clear. Public frustration followed. Prices rose. Availability fluctuated. The crown faced criticism not for policy, but for outcomes it could no longer fully control. Authority appeared weakened not by rebellion, but by non-cooperation. The guild's power lay in restraint. Foreign observers noticed. They questioned whether London was governed by law or by consensus among economic elites. Rival cities attempted to exploit the tension, offering more flexible terms to traders willing to shift allegiance. The guild's strength, once purely local, now carried geopolitical weight. Inside Parliament, debate intensified. Some argued that the guild stabilized commerce and deserved autonomy. Others warned that allowing collective economic power to dominate governance threatened sovereignty itself. The question became unavoidable. How much coordination was too much? The city felt the pressure tightening. The guild had not seized the crown, but had wrapped itself around it, and disentangling that grip would require confrontation. London stood on the edge of a conflict where authority would have to reassert itself, or adapt to being shared in ways it had never intended. The confrontation became unavoidable when the guild's restraint turned into open obstruction. Supplies critical to state projects slowed to a crawl. Contract expired without renewal. Entire sectors moved in coordinated hesitation, each pause amplifying the pressure on the crown. What had once been leverage was now brinkmanship. Officials responded with inquiries and warnings, but authority faltered in practice. Enforcement depended on the same networks, now resisting cooperation. Punishment risked collapse. Compromise risked submission. The crown found itself negotiating not from strength, but from necessity. Inside the guild, unity began to fracture. Some members feared they had pushed too far. Others believed this was the moment to secure permanent authority. Internal debates grew fierce. The collective that once spoke with one voice now argued behind closed doors about how much control was too much. Power, once consolidated, was proving difficult to direct. The city felt the instability immediately. Markets reacted to uncertainty. Prices surged and stalled. Merchants delayed investment, unsure which side would prevail. Trust in governance thinned, as outcomes depended less on law than on leverage. London's reputation as a predictable center of trade began to suffer. The conflict escalated when the Crown introduced legislation aimed directly at the guild structure. The proposal threatened to dissolve coordinated control by limiting collective decision-making power. It was a direct challenge, one that forced the guild to choose between compromise and confrontation. The response was explosive. Petitions flooded Parliament. Demonstrations erupted among guild members and supporters. Production halted in protest. The city ground against itself, each side testing how much pressure the other could endure. What had begun as a question of influence now threatened stability itself. Foreign rivals watched closely. Some offered support to disaffected traders. Others prepared to absorb commerce if London fractured. The stakes expanded beyond the city. Control of governance was now entangled with national standing. London stood at a breaking point. Either authority would be reclaimed through law, or economic power would cement itself as a parallel form of rule. The guild that once protected order had become a force capable of reshaping the state, and the next move would decide whether that power endured or collapsed. The resolution came through confrontation tempered by restraint. Faced with mounting instability, the Crown moved decisively, but not destructively. The proposed legislation was revised, not to dismantle the guild entirely, but a fractured ability to act as a single, unified force. Collective coordination was limited. Transparency was imposed. Authority was rebalanced. The guild resisted, but division weakened its stance. Members who depended on stability over dominance broke ranks. Production resumed unevenly, then steadily. The collective grip loosened, not through defeat, but through dilution. Power dispersed across smaller units, each still influential, but none overwhelming. Markets responded quickly. Prices stabilized. Supply chains normalized. Confidence returned, cautious but present. London's reputation recovered as predictability replaced brinkmanship. The city learned that coordination strengthens commerce, but unchecked coordination threatens governance. The Crown emerged with authority intact, but altered. It no longer ignored economic power. It integrated it. Under rules that prevented capture, the guilds remained vital, but bounded. Influence was acknowledged, not surrendered to. Looking back, the episode revealed a lasting truth. When economic power concentrates, it does not need to overthrow authority to control it. It only needs to become indispensable. Preventing that outcome requires constant balance, not dominance. London carried this lesson forward. Its institutions learned to monitor concentration before it hardened into control. The city did not abandon cooperation, but it refused to let any single collective speak for all. Sometimes the greatest threat to authority is not rebellion, but dependency. Subscribe to join the journey. The